In this lesson I want to add some color and detail. Nothing too complex, I'll mostly stick to the silhouette of the axe. But what's important here is that I'll be giving it some basic light and shadow. First I start by removing the stroke and giving it some proper colors. In this case I just wanted a metal looking axe, so I'm giving the component shades of grey. The only shape that won't be grey is the handle, which is supposed to be wood. Now I'm creating these weird shapes on top of the handle. I told you in the previous lesson that when I'm drawing with the pen tool, I'm always prefer to work with straight lines and then after the proportions are right, curve those lines into position. Well, very soon I'm curving these polygons and they'll be looking like cloth wrapping around the handle. I'm giving the cloth a temporary color. Very soon I'll replace it with some gradients. Now it's time to bend the shapes so they look like bandages. This is a very simple and fast way to make some clothes. If you want something more complex, you should probably look for reference. What I'm doing here is to bend up or down the sides to give the impression that each shape wraps around the handle. I'm also trying to layer the shape so the silhouette looks a bit more interesting. I'm creating a shape between the borders to imply a new plane in the blade. I enable snapping so the nodes are created exactly on top of where they are needed. I use the silhouette of the blade to clip the excess of the new shape. This is a common technique if you want to create a shape that's partially on top of another. And because the blade is symmetrical, I can just duplicate the clip shape to the other side. I decided I wanted something on top, so I created this triangular shape with the pen tool. Later on, I'll use a highlight to imply more than one side. Now for some detail. I'm creating a moon symbol that I'll place all over the axe. Here I'm just using the difference operation to create the moon. For some extra detail, I just created this triangle which I'm duplicating and scaling and flipping all around the moon. I'm using the control key so the triangles snap to fixed angles when rotating. And the shift key so the scaling is done from the center. Then I select everything and group it with Ctrl G so it's easier to handle. I'm using a nice little trick to add a bit more detail with a highlight. I'm implying some light coming from the center up. So I just duplicate the shape and scale it a lot. Then I pick a slightly higher value color than the one it has, so it looks like the light is hitting the top part of the phone. And I'm doing this with all the different forms of the axe, leaving behind the forms that don't have a top side like the handle. Now I'll create some more detail. I'm just using this triangle and I'm duplicating and scaling them horizontally so they all look like they go around the circular form. And I'm enabling snapping to snap them corner to corner. Just using an intersection to delete the excess of the side triangle. I'm duplicating the whole ring of triangles to the bottom. adding some highlight to the triangles to imply a more complex shape. Again, I'm using a clip to remove the excess. More highlight on top, this time I'm using a difference operation. And one nice trick to make an indentation in a surface is to create some shadow cast to itself from the side of the light source and a highlight in the border opposite to the light source. So I'm creating the highlight in the border, duplicating and then using a difference. Of course I sample the color of the highlight. Then I'm using the same process to create the shadow. This time I make it a bit more thicker so it's clearly visible. Now for the other shadows, here I'm using clips instead of the difference operation. You'll see later why. Now on this part I need a clip for the shadow, but I don't have a shape that fits the silhouette, since the silhouette is made from 3 different objects. So I had to select the 3 objects, duplicate them and join them together using a Boolean operation, and use this new path as a clip for the shadow. The shapes are still separated though. For the moon is the same than for the indentation in the blade. You want to create a shadow on top and a highlight below. And with a few duplications and differences, it's done. And because I want the moon symbol to be an indentation as well, I had to repeat the same technique. In this case, the best way to do complex shapes like this is to select them all and join them together into a single object. I used Ctrl+ to join them with a union. Joining non-overlapping objects with a union has the same outcome than just using the Combine Path option. I follow the exact same process with the triangles since they are indentations as well. I end up copying the triangles on top and moving them below. Now for the cloth highlight, I do something different. Because I don't need nearly as much accuracy, I duplicated all the cloth shapes. Move them a bit lower. And I just use the paint bucket. The paint bucket will create a shape slightly off model and with terrible node disposition. But since it's an organic shape meant to be looked from a distance, there's no problem with saving some time. Now you could leave it here, maybe tweak the colors a bit or even add in some more details. But what I'll be doing in the next lesson is to use some gradients and some blend modes to give the axe a bit more depthness. So I see you there.